Hello, in today's foundation roundup, I have 4 newer foundation releases to review and give you my thoughts on. And as I always do in these foundation roundups, I'll be showing you how they apply, what they look like on my skin, and how they wear throughout the day, as well as what skin types I think would benefit from each foundation. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new. I test out a lot of foundations, concealers, powders, face products here on my channel. I'm in my upper 40s, and as we get older, it just gets harder and harder to find the right face and skin products. So I test a bunch of products out so you don't have to. So let's go ahead and get into these 4 that I've been testing and see what I think about them. In these videos, I cover a couple of things that are pretty important when it comes to testing and how foundations wear before I get into the first foundation. Even though I test foundations that are appropriate across all skin types, it's important that you know my skin type as well as my climate, because those are factors that can make a difference with how a foundation wears for me versus how it wears for you. Of course, there are other factors that come into play, such as the skincare we use, how long we let that skincare sit on our skin before we go in with our makeup, skin chemistry in general, primers, and of course other things. Now, I am someone that tests foundations out multiple days using various primers, no primer, and different methods, so I can get a really good idea of how I feel about it before I review it. I have combination oily skin, meaning that I can get some shine, oil breakthrough in my T-zone, but the perimeter of my face is pretty normal and can even be dry in the colder months. And because the center of my face, my forehead, nose, T-zone area can get that shine breakthrough, I am someone that does need to set my face with powder. You may not be, but I do need to do that. And I will have all of my control, my regularly used primers and powders that I normally reach for linked down below, along with all the products I'm sharing today and what I'm wearing. I'll start with what is probably the most hyped as well as the most controversial foundation out of this bunch. There are so many different perspectives on this foundation. I've been asked about it a ton. This is the Haus Triclone Skin Tech Foundation. It's $45 for 1 ounce, and it comes in this really beautiful frosted glass bottle with a pump. There are 51 shades. I'll get into my shade when I get into the application portion. This is cruelty-free, vegan, and gluten-free, and there are several skin benefiting ingredients in here, which we're seeing from a lot of different foundations, but these are a little bit different in my opinion. The first is fermented arnica. It's supposed to visibly reduce redness and irritation, which can be especially great for maturing skin because redness can become more and more of an issue. Actually, all of these can be really great for mature skin. So the second is a complex, which is a proprietary blend of medicinal herbs that promotes healing and calming. And the third is a bioferment complex. It's another proprietary blend of super antioxidants that help protect the skin from stress. So this has a fairly runny texture, and the shade that you are seeing is shade 175, which was a little bit too dark and yellow for my skin at this time. So I did swap that shade out for shade 160, which is actually what's on my face today as I sit here and talk to you right now. This has been on my face about 5 hours now, maybe even a little longer than that. If you think you are my light, medium, neutral, leaning warm shade match twin, I'm very happy with shade 160 for my skin tone. If you want to see other foundation and concealer shades that I wear, you can see those lists over on my blog. They are linked down in my description box in almost every one of my videos. This applies and blends out very easily. I personally prefer using a damp sponge. I like the coverage level it gives, which I'll get to in a minute, and I love the way the pouncing motion really just presses and fuses it into the skin. It almost immediately smooths my pores, my skin. A lot of times when foundations do that kind of fusing thing, they can set down pretty quickly. This one doesn't do that. It still gives me enough time to easily work with it. It almost seems like it's a primer and foundation in one because of how it smooths and covers all in one. I think a little goes a long way. I get medium to medium full coverage using a damp beauty blender because of the blur blurring and smoothing that I get almost immediately when it hits my skin. I think getting a good match is key for having this effect. I feel like it does this even better now that my match is closer than it did when it wasn't. But in my opinion, going in with less product initially in a thin layer is much better, and just adding a little bit more where necessary. I just feel like the effect that you're going to get with that thin layer is just so beautiful for giving you that smooth, natural, flattering finish. And I would say that this does give a natural, radiant finish, which if you have my skin type, many foundations that give a natural, radiant, kind of glowy finish can be a little bit too dewy or glowy and not really set down, kind of be a little bit slippy. This isn't. This is kind of the best of all worlds. It also feels very lightweight, even while wearing it throughout the day, which is another thing I want to address. If you do get some shine in your T-zone, if you tend to make your own dew throughout the day, sometimes those types of foundations can feel a little bit heavy, or you can just start to feel them in general during the day. I don't have that situation going on here. Now, as far as wear, keep in mind, all of these foundations were tested when it was in the 90s here in New Orleans. It just got out of the 90s. And of course it was humid because it's New Orleans. So if I don't wear a primer with this, depending on what I'm doing that day, I would say before I get any shine breakthrough, it could be 3 to 4 hours. I tried various primers underneath of various types, again, linked down below, and they all performed fine. I just love the way this foundation looks so much because of the way it fuses to my skin when I don't wear a primer. I just kind of prefer it that way, even though I get maybe 30 minutes to an hour more time before I have to blot if I wear a primer. However, even though I have to blot away some shine, it's not greasy shine, it's just some shine. This has never pulled in my pores, given me polka dot pores, or settled into my forehead wrinkles. That's always an area of concern for me. And on long days, because it's so fused with my skin, I find if it does wear away, I don't notice it. It just looks flattering all day. I wasn't prepared for how much I was gonna love this foundation. And because of the type of foundation that it is, medium to medium full coverage, naturally radiant, I think it would work well across all skin types and be beautiful for mature skin. Now keep in mind those factors I talk about in the beginning. Just because it works well for me doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work well for you, even if you live in similar conditions and have a similar skin type. Everyone's different. Your body chemistry is different. We all use different skincare. But man, this has been a hit. I love it. I loved it enough to swap it out for a different shade because this will be reached for a lot. Next up is a product that has been reformulated. Is it for the better or for the worse? We shall see. This is Dr. Jart BB Premium Beauty Balm, and I know a lot of you really loved this product, or the old formulation. I was not one of those people. It did not work for me, and we will discuss that as we go through. So this is $44 for 1.35 ounces, so you get more for your money with this product. The typical foundation BB cream is usually around 1 ounce. So the new bottle is this hard plastic tube that has a pump. This is a color corrector that comes in 4 flexible shades that adapt to suit a range of skin tones. I got it in the shade light medium to medium. This is cruelty-free and fragrance-free, and it has SPF 40 in the form of both a chemical and a mineral sunscreen. It also has niacinamide, which is supposed to help the skin barrier. They say this is a multitasking powered BB cream that hydrates, conceals, and protects. It's supposed to be your moisturizer, your makeup, and your sunscreen in one, which I highly disagree with because the amount of product you would have to apply to get the adequate sun protection you actually need would be way too much. So please apply your sunscreen first and use this as supplemental protection. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but that is where I stand on that. This has a thick yet creamy consistency. It blends out very easily. On the left side, I think it's your left side, I am using my fingers just to see if I can blend it out like a moisturizer. I like to do that with BB creams a lot of the times. And on the right side, I'm using a dry sponge because a dry sponge typically gives more coverage than a wet sponge, and oftentimes similar coverage to using your fingers but without the streaking. I would say this gives light coverage that evens out redness and looks like natural radiant skin before I set it. Now the reason why I didn't like the old formula is because it felt very heavy and greasy, and I got really, really shiny with it during the day. I think it was suited more for normal to dry skin, and it just didn't suit my skin type. So I really didn't go into this with high hopes, but this, in contrast, feels nice. It feels lightweight. I'd say the finish of this looks nice and natural. It's very flattering. It looks smoother on my pores, just on my skin in general, on the side where I use the sponge versus my fingers. I think it's sunk into those areas a little bit more on the finger side, so that's just personal preference. If you want it to look more like your natural skin texture, you could use your fingers, but if you want it to look a little smoother, maybe go in with that dry sponge. I do get some shine during the day that I need to blot. I would say this wears really nicely throughout the day for maybe 5.5 to 6 hours before it starts breaking down and wearing away, and when it does start to wear away, it wears away gracefully. Now, if you have sensitive skin, I would check the ingredient list and see if any of the ingredients are triggers for you. There is that chemical sunscreen that some of us can't typically tolerate, or at least not on a regular basis, a daily basis, but there's also some citrus going on in here, so just check that ingredient list. But my overall verdict is that this is a nice light coverage, skin evening, lightweight BB cream beauty balm for a mid-length day. It's not my favorite in the world, but it's worlds better than the previous version for me and my oily combination skin. And if you have dry skin, I think that you'll like this version too. Next up, we have RMS Beauty ReEvolve Natural Finish Foundation that I have not heard many people talk about. Is there a reason? Let's discuss. So this is $48 for 0.98 ounces. There are 15 shades. I'm in the shade 22, which is described as a light medium shade. It's kind of a different description, but that's how it's described. It comes in this sleek pump bottle, which is recyclable. When you look at it in comparison to a regular foundation bottle, I mean, it's really nice and tall and sleek. This is cruelty-free, vegan, and gluten-free, and it has some anti-aging and skin benefiting ingredients, as we see in so many foundations today. It has Titanol, a proprietary advanced ingredient that visibly tones, firms, and smooths. It also has vegetable squalane to hydrate, and an adaptogenic herbal blend, which is also supposed to hydrate, but also balance, soften, and smooth. This has a rather runny consistency. I prefer to use a damp or a dry sponge. Dry if I want a little bit more coverage without worrying about streaks from a brush. Now, the application clips that you're seeing run a little bit yellow. It's not this yellow in person. It was just the lighting, the way the sun was shining in. This does a nice job of smoothing, evening out redness, and I would say it gives medium to just under medium full coverage if you want to build it up just a little bit, and it feels nice and lightweight on my skin. Now, this clip is from a day when I didn't have on primer underneath, but it performed about the same way on days when I wore various types of primers if I was running around doing things outside of my house. At roughly 3.5 hours in, I would start to get some shine breakthrough, which is not a deal breaker, but the foundation started to gather in my forehead creases, which is not good at that point during the day. It's not good at any point during the day. At around 7 to 9 hours, depending on what was going on during the day, it showed significant wear and fading and just didn't look good. Now, if I was inside my house, it tended to perform better. I didn't get as shiny as quickly. I didn't crease up as quickly. It just lasted longer and looked better throughout the day, which leads me to believe that the performance is correlated with my skin type and climate. After I finished testing and I gathered my thoughts, I went and looked at some of the reviews, and they're actually pretty good and kind of confirmed what I was thinking, that my experience has something to do with my climate and my skin type. So if you have oily combination skin and you are in a less hot and humid environment, which is why it was performing that way when I was running around versus being in my house, it might perform better for you. If you have normal or dry skin, you might really like this for a medium-ish coverage foundation that looks really natural. Unfortunately for me, my skin type and my climate, it's not going to be a go-to though. We have another foundation reformulation in this tiny little bunch of foundations with Armani Beauty Power Fabric Plus Weightless Matte Foundation. This is also the luxury foundation of this bunch. This is $69 for 1 ounce. Now, somehow I never tried the original Power Fabric, but I don't think that the bottle changed very much. I mean, this pretty much is very similar to the Armani Luminous Silk bottle. There are 30 shades and I am in shade 5.75. It's supposed to be a medium to full coverage, natural matte foundation that lasts up to 24 hours and feels really lightweight and provides SPF 25. You know how I feel about that from earlier. This has a slightly runny texture. It's very easy to blend out and apply. My preferred method, as it is with most medium to full coverage foundations, is using a damp sponge. Now, I know they claim this gives medium up to full coverage. I disagree with that. I find this gives medium up to medium full coverage that looks extremely natural and feels very lightweight. I find this to be incredibly smoothing on my pores, my skin in general. It's very flattering. And instead of giving a flat matte finish the way a lot of, up to 24-hour wear foundations can, it gives a natural matte finish. Now, I went into this wanting it to be as bulletproof as Estee Lauder Double Wear because it was easier to apply and it has a little bit less coverage. I thought maybe it would be a little bit more versatile. But when I was out in really hot, humid weather that normally Estee Lauder Double Wear really holds up in, this did not hold up. But in milder weather, or if I was maybe indoors and outdoors and didn't, sweat too much, this settled into kind of a softer finish, not even a matte. It's almost like my natural radiance comes through, but the foundation still lasts and it looks really beautiful. So this is more weather dependent for me as someone who is oily combination and makes my own dew during the day, especially in those hotter months. I think this is a great counterpart to Luminous Silk. I can't wear Luminous Silk on longer days because it just doesn't last long on me, even though it looks beautiful. This gives me an option that looks really beautiful, but it lasts longer. But I also think if you have dry skin or normal skin, this isn't a matte that you're unable to wear. It can give you some longevity and still give you that natural matte finish that's not drying, which can be an issue. It's not really too much of anything, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This turned out to be a foundation that when I initially tried it, because I initially tried it on super hot days, I wasn't sure if I was gonna like it, but it really does have a place, especially now with fall being here. So I have 4 very different types of foundations in this video, and I feel like they're all appropriate across all skin types in different ways, different finishes, different coverage levels. Do you see one here that you feel like is appropriate for you? Have you tried any of these? Let me know in the comments down below. Let me know if there are any new foundations or products you want to see me review. I do these foundation roundups regularly. If you want to see more foundations I reviewed, you can see those here on the screen to see what foundations might be appropriate for your skin type. I hope you found this helpful and enjoyable. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Bye.